1. I used to work at a grocery store, and I was in the online order department. Basically, we filled online orders and then loaded them into customers' cars when they came to pick them up. On this particular day, things were slow. A customer showed up with a rather large order and a complicated payment method. Me and one of my co-workers decided to take it out together to shorten the process. He took out the tablet to process her payment, and I was in charge of loading her order into the car. Now, this woman had a small car, and she wanted the order loaded into the back seat, which had a car seat in there as well, making the order harder to load in. I did my best to load things so that they wouldn't fall, but it was a struggle. However, I managed to load it and get the door closed. Keep in mind the 12 packs of drinks she had ordered were placed on the seat because they were at the bottom of the totes containing her order. I had packed the order in like sardines, and the woman was far too impatient for me to have taken the time to reload the order and put the 12 packs on the car floor. The rest of the groceries had been piled from the car floor up with the soft things on top. So I assumed that they would be safe, as the seat had a backward lean, and it was unlikely the drinks would move forward to hit them. To no one's surprise, she calls our department to complain, and unfortunately for her, I was the one who picked up. This is roughly how the conversation went. "Hi, I picked up my order about an hour ago. 2 people came out to deliver it, and the boy was fine, but that girl, was terrible. She put my drinks on top of the bread and chips, and they're ruined." "Oh, I'm sorry about that." She then proceeds to interrupt me and go on and on about how awful that girl was and how she should be fired for being so bad at the job. After about 5 minutes of this, I see my manager Lindsay come from the back room and see me on the phone, clearly annoyed. Stopping, she pointed to the phone and mouthed, "What's wrong?" It was at this point that I had an idea. I cut the woman off and go, "Ma'am, would you like to speak to a manager?" She enthusiastically agrees, and I smile to myself. I just barely pull the phone away from my face and put it slightly down toward my chest, making sure that she can definitely still hear me. Looking my manager in the face, I very loudly say, "Lindsay, some lady called to complain about me and wants to talk to you." Silence from the phone. Lindsay comes over and takes the phone, and I stand there as they have a very short conversation before Lindsay hangs up the phone. She turned to me, laughing, and said that she was suddenly extremely polite about what was wrong. Lindsay asked me to be a little more careful loading groceries in the future, and left the back room smiling and shaking her head. Sometimes I miss that job. It had its funny moments. 2. This happened several years ago, and it's such a small thing that it kinda stretches the term malicious, but it's immensely satisfying to think back on, even though it enraged me at the time, so I want to share it anyway. For context, I am non-binary, they, them, and at the time, I had only recently started to come out openly. I'm extremely out and proud now, but back then I was always anxious about telling anyone I was non-binary. On to the story. Over the past decade plus, I've had over a dozen jobs ranging from customer service to food service to CNA to odd jobs and plenty more. Safe to say I am very familiar with the job application process, and I learned very quickly how to tell if a job I started would be a good fit for me within a few days of working there. At the time of this story, I just needed a job to fill in my summer free time and hopefully build up a little savings. And I knew that a restaurant was going to be my best bet, especially if I could get a job as a delivery driver to avoid the whole tip thing. Waitstaff is typically paid less than minimum wage because it's expected that you make up the difference through tips. But oftentimes delivery drivers make at or above minimum wage in addition to any tips we can make. There was a new restaurant in town that had just opened recently, and they were still trying to fill out their staff roster. So I was pretty sure that when I applied I would get the job. I did, of course. They hired me on the spot after one interview and asked if I could start the next day. So the next day I dressed according to the dress code, and I went in to start my first day. They provided me with a name tag and a half apron that tied around the waist. It was a slow day, which was good because I and several others needed to be trained. And in food service, you always want to be trained on either the slowest or the busiest days. In between means too much opportunity for mistakes. So like I said, it was a slow day and a couple of us were between duties and chilling, hanging out near the bar, talking. One of them asked me about the name on my name tag, Mel, asking if it was short for anything. I hadn't used my dead name since middle school, except for legal documents, so I said no, and with a bit of eager trepidation, explained that I was non-binary, and that was the name I wanted to go by, because I didn't want to use my given name anymore. They kinda went quiet and just said, "Oh," and moved on a little awkwardly. Later, toward the end of the shift, the manager called me into her office, and mind you, this is the same woman who was so eager to hire me the day before. I went thinking maybe I'd violated the dress code somehow or something like that. I thought I was going to get a small reprimand or an evaluation on my first day of work or whatever. She sat me down and gave me this look like a disappointed schoolteacher, and asked if I'd told the others that I was non-binary and wanted to be referred to with the wrong pronouns. I kinda blanked out and just said, "Yes?" So she sighed and said, in that oh-so-tolerant voice, "Well, we don't really do that pronoun thing here. So if you're going to insist on this, then I'm not sure you're a good fit for us." Being that I was a teenager, I can almost guarantee she was trying to correct my behavior by threatening a job I so clearly needed. Well, I called her bluff. And the best part is, I didn't even really mean to. I was still kinda blanked out, emotionally numb from what was the most blatant transphobia I had ever experienced. So I stood, took off my name tag and apron, and said something to the effect of, "Okay, I guess I'm not a good fit for you," and walked out, never to return. While I highly doubt I had any actual effect on staffing needs, I like to think she was a little short-handed for a few days. 3. This happened a while ago. At that time, I was currently 13, 14 years old, I think. I was on a family vacation with my best friend. On this trip, we were supposed to stay 5 days in the lake and then come back home. My mom is, most of the time, a major a-hole, so I was not surprised when she started having a bad attitude with me. After being 3 days on this trip, I was exhausted. I spent all day on the lake and was really, really tired, and I wanted to go lay down in the camping tent and sleep the day away. My mom decided this was a great time to ask me for help. She wanted me to carry my brother to the lake, bathe him, and bring him back to her. He was around a year old or so. Obviously, I was so out of myself that I told her no and that she could do it herself. There was around a 10-minute walk to the lake. She started screaming at me as to how bad of a sister and child I must be because I've never helped her and yada yada. Then, after screaming at me for half an hour, she asked me if I was now ready to help her. I responded no again, and that she hadn't got out of the van all day and that she must have been filled with enough energy to do it. Then she goes to scream at my dad to pack things up, take away my phone from me, and that I was grounded until she said so. Also, she made me go alone with her in the car ride. We went 2 cars because we didn't fit. And proceeded to lecture me the 2 hours back home about respect, how I should behave, that I should help around more in the house, and have more family time, and also that I could be doing other things and to get a hobby because for her I was apparently all day on my phone. Cue the malicious compliance. I decided that if she wanted all that, then I could manage. We arrived home around 11 p.m., and she went to sleep at 3 a.m. for some reason. At 9 a.m. I was up, and decided that my new hobby was to play the flute at first thing in the morning. I proceeded to play the flute so bad and loud that my brother started crying. I was playing the flute in the yard, and they were in their room all the way across the house, and with their windows closed. She couldn't tell me anything because when she came to the yard to tell me off, I was so polite and gave a perfect reason that I was far and I was getting a new hobby as she had told me. The house stayed squeaky clean for 2 weeks, but every day I made a point to go to sleep before everyone so that every day I woke up a little bit earlier and ready to blast my flute each day for around 1 hour till she couldn't bear it anymore. I think I even tried playing the flute at 5 a.m., but by the end of 2 weeks the punishment wasn't over, and I was slowly driving my mom insane by messing with her sleep schedule, and I knew that. I also started lecturing my parents because they didn't have proper manners and couldn't tell me nothing because they knew I was right. I spent all day stuck to either my mom or dad and talked their ear off and made everyone watch those horrible educational films no one likes. Made them participate in family bonding time like making cookies. Proceeded to leave as much of a mess as I could, and when they told me to clean it, "Sorry, but I've already cleaned the house today. Could you do it?" I was eating their brains, their sanity, and their free time, either by nagging them or by cautiously waking my brother up, but doing it in a quiet way so that they wouldn't find out, and having them to deal with the baby all day long. The last day, around 2.5 weeks, my mom was so fed up that she gave me the phone back. It's been around 2 or 3 years since then, and I haven't been grounded since. 4. I had this best friend that I did everything with. We were a little codependent, and she has a baby boy. I was very involved with her child since he was born, and used to take her son to nursery regularly. These events all happened about a year and a little bit into his life. We were very close, as the baby's father wasn't really in the picture. It was just me, her, and the baby that did everything together. I just want to add this to show you how deep it goes. Fast forward, and she moves into a new flat. I help her move in and obviously start spending a lot of time there. I have a friend who is friends with someone who lives in the same building. She spent a lot of time there with a few others. I met this man through my friend that I already knew, and he is Australian. He's a little bit older, and I was pretty much into him from when I met him. We're gonna call him Trash Boy. We start talking and quickly start seeing each other. We're not official, but sleeping together. Texting constantly throughout the day, flirty, and all of that sort of thing when you like someone new. One thing I noticed was her snide remarks whenever I brought him up, or she would almost get angry that I would say his name, and I didn't get why until after. This continues for a couple of weeks before me and my best friend are drinking, and she tells me she needs to talk about something with me and it's important. I nod and let her talk, and she tells me she's really sorry, but she's been sleeping with Trash Boy. I cried and shouted and very quickly left her house because I didn't want to be there with her. I continued to text her that night, and her child was with her sister because we already planned to go out. She stopped responding, and I felt really bad that maybe I'd led her to something. She struggles with her mental health, and I felt really guilty. I walked back over to her house because she wasn't responding, and when I was 2 minutes away, she replied to all of them and said she was going to sleep. I tell her that we need to talk, and I want to see her and talk it all through because I felt bad and wanted to talk with her. I get over to her flat and she stopped responding again, but I had my own key, so I walk up her stairs to her door, and lo and behold, who do I see? Trash Boy with his eyes fixed on the floor as he walked past me on the steps. He lived on the bottom floor and she lived on the third. I knew immediately that he was leaving her place. I walk up to the door and unlock it, and it doesn't take me long to realize that she's not in the flat. We still had our live locations on, though. I could see my location, and hers slightly to the right beneath mine, where it would be if she was at his place. I can see she's at his and clearly won't talk to me, so I leave, and there was a bit of back and forth before we stopped being friends, but basically we stopped being friends. Here's where the revenge plays in. I later found out that they moved in together. Me and my friend were particularly bored, and I was feeling a bit hurt by the move-in, so one evening we both start plotting on how to get back at them. We decide we're gonna send her a letter from an Australian landlord to make her think he's gonna move back out there. Then we come up with something much better. We decide to write a fake love letter from his ex. The letter we wrote is the full 9 yards. It paints out as if he'd had a girlfriend back home the entire time. I really fleshed it out and made it seem as real as I could. I even mentioned how excited she was for him to come home to her after seeing how good he was with his friend's kid. Then signed it with his last serious girlfriend's name. It was the sloppiest love letter from his childhood sweetheart who is waiting for him to come home. The letter goes on about how secure she is, how loved she feels by him, etc. The friend who was helping me take part in this plan told me her friend was in Australia currently, and we asked her if she could bring us back a stamp. She instead offered to handwrite the letter in her girliest handwriting, adding hearts and spraying perfume on it, then sending it from Australia, which we both came on board with very quickly. Because even if she reads the letter and thinks something's off with something I've written, she won't be able to dispute the facts that it had come from Australia. Even if she doesn't completely believe it, the fact alone will be enough to drive her crazy and convince herself to believe it. Because if your boyfriend got a letter from an ex saying how secure you feel in the relationship with him, how much of a good father you think he would be, how you can't wait for him to come home to you, etc., no matter how many times he denies it, you wouldn't believe it either. The letter has been sent, and even though I won't get to actually witness any of what happens, I know it'll wreak chaos. How I would love to be a fly on the wall the day it arrives, though. The thing that makes all this a little bit sweeter is the fact that Trash Boy can't stop viewing my Insta stories currently. I'm talking first half an hour posting, anything. He's seen it. Not that he means absolutely anything to me. This is all done in spite of her, because your best friend that is practically helping you raise your child and supporting you like a significant other is all thrown away over Australian dick. Gross. 5. This story is from when I was 4 years old and heading off to a trial day at a new kindergarten. I can clearly recall this day even though I was only 4. My mum dropped me off and I went to the kindy with my little bag and packed lunch and prepared to make friends. I have a pretty good time for the morning, that is until tea time. My family didn't have a lot of money and the kindy supplied fruit and healthy snacks. So I guess my mum just thought I'd have those for morning tea. One of the kids asked me why I was only eating fruit. I explained that we didn't have biscuits and chocolate as snacks in my house because my family don't have a lot of money. A mistake in hindsight. After I said that, the girl made a face at me and turned away. When I tried to join and play again, she stuck her nose in the air and said she wouldn't play with a smelly poor kid, and began a campaign of getting the other kids to chant insults at me and tease me about my clothes, etc., saying I was so poor my lunch was probably just soggy sandwiches. I was so disappointed and upset that this one girl, Lisa, was really trying so hard to turn the other kids against me. I remember wondering what I did to her that made her be so mean. Eventually I decided to find a way to get her back. I found the perfect opportunity. I went out into the cloakroom, which was where our bags were, on the pretext of needing the loo, and looked around for her bag. My first idea had been to take some of her lunch, so I found her bag with her name on it. I could already read it and took out her lunchbox. I had to push a chair over to the hook to reach it, but I got it down. I was just going to eat something yummy from her lunchbox, and then an even better idea hit me. I could flush her lunch down the loo, and then she will be the kid with soggy sandwiches. I went into the bathroom, opened the lunchbox, and tipped the contents into the toilet. When I pressed the flush button, I kept reciting, "Wisa," while I watched in delight as her sandwiches and snacks circled around the bowl. I put the lid back on the lunchbox, put it back into the bag, and hung it back up. Then went back into the kindy room and pretended nothing had happened. I enjoyed the rest of my day immensely, particularly the part where Lisa found out that she had no lunch. Of course, the kindy staff made her something to eat so she didn't go hungry. It was pretty petty for a 4-year-old, but looking back, I'm a little impressed with myself for hatching a plan that wasn't just using insults, or pushing the other girl like some kids do, and which didn't hurt anyone. Years later, I ended up working with Lisa and nearly came clean, until she showed that unfortunately her behavior hadn't changed at all. Luckily, this time we were adults, and I had friends at work already, so I didn't need to resort to flushing her lunch down the loo. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 384. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and also support me on my Patreon page, which you can do for as little as $1 or more a month. Every dollar helps keep us going a bit longer. Okay, no other bits of business today, so let's move along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... We're in October now. Halloween will soon be upon us. I personally am not doing anything for Halloween this year, I just don't have the time for it. But how do you like to celebrate Halloween? Do you dress up? Do you decorate your house? Maybe you're of an age where you still go out trick-or-treating. Let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And today's answer comes from Revenge is Ice Cream 382, and I think it was in relation to horror franchises or movie franchises that just never clicked with you. Today's answer comes from Reluge. For me, it's a Final Destination movie, so predictable, and they treat the human body like a super squishy blog with no bones. Cannot take anything in those movies seriously. That's fair enough, and thank you very much for your answer, Reluge. With that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.